Hi, and welcome to the final of 5 presentations on the interwar period, that period of time from World War I to World War II. These are notes 13.1e, and this is, of course, Mr. Marks. Now, while the world was changing its understanding of the roles of government, while it was changing its understanding of the roles of physics, nature, time, and even our own minds, we had to find new ways of expressing ourselves during this time period. This led to many changes in art. Art shows these changing viewpoints that people have of the world, and probably one of the most dynamic of these, one of the most expressive, is Cubism. These are Picasso's paintings, Le Guitarist on the left, and Guernica on the right-hand side, which actually plays into part of what we're going to talk about later when we talk about the Spanish Civil War. These are both examples of Cubism. It's a blend of European and African art, which breaks up three-dimensional objects into smaller fragments and then composes them into complex patterns of angles and planes. Often faces, even though they're viewed from the left, both eyes will be seen on the right. There's a different way of putting all this together in order to give the mind an impression of an image, in order to give the hints of the major points of the image rather than giving the entire image itself. In some ways, it's almost a metaphor for the way that the world itself seemed to be a shattered reflection of what it was before. Probably most famously, you have abstract art. This is less defined even than Cubism. This is composed, abstract art is composed of lines, colors, and shapes with no recognizable subject matter, no recognizable pattern. I mean, people, the purpose of abstract art is that when you look at it and you see something from it, what you're seeing is actually completely constructed in your own mind. You're taking those images, you're taking the patterns, you're taking the views which you're seeing, the different colors which you're seeing, and your mind is constructing them into things which are meaningful for you. Thus, abstract art is different for every person. Every person who views it will have their own picture which is drawn out of it, will have their own view of what it is that's going on, and it will directly express those feelings which are deepest within us. Thus, abstract art is almost a direct link to Sigmund Freud's kind of means of discovery of the power of a person's id, or that person's subconscious level. And that's really what artists are trying to achieve with it. And my personal favorite is surrealist art. These combine the modern ideas of art and Sigmund Freud's idea of the unconscious mind, and tries to, as accurately as possible, capture that dreamlike quality, that dreamlike world, which we have. And this dreamlike movement is called surrealism. It's beyond reality. It's an imaginative reality. And its whole purpose is to try to portray the workings of the unconscious mind. How do you dream of things when you actually see it? The left-hand painting being the kind of melting of everything, the melting of time. The right hand, just the odd placement of the apple, showing a lack of identity, all sorts of things which you can come up with, again, with your own mind. The difference between this and abstract art, where abstract art's whole point is to see how the viewer changes everything, is surrealism is trying to describe what the artist sees in the artist's own dreams, and in the artist's beliefs. So you have these three main forms of art, all dealing with uh, this new kind of broken way that we look at reality. Now, art does not just include visual art. It can also include the written word. And one of the real changes in literature is going to be a move to what's called stream of consciousness writing. This whole movement is supposed to show the confusing nature of reality, the way that we're bombarded with images, with feelings, with hormones, with viewpoints, and the way that our mind processes it. This idea of writing things the way a person would actually think, trying to write it down as closely as possible to that. This way, stories don't move from point A to point B. Just like Einstein's time was broken up and was no longer consistent, so too is stream of consciousness writing. This idea that instead of just starting at the beginning of the story and telling the whole story until you get to the end, you might now start in the middle of the story. And as the character starts to remember more things about that person's past, more of those will be added in. And then every once in a while it will shoot forward into the future in order to see what the results of these different aspects of the story are. It can create for a very confusing narrative, but again, kind of like surrealist art, the purpose of stream of consciousness is usually to show the artist's state of mind, to show the way an artist would actually think about something. And the exceptional literary writers of this time would actually be able to make it so you, as a reader, would be able to think those things in the order that the writer actually thought them. Writing, as Stephen King put it, is a form of mass mind control. The author is putting down the author's thoughts down onto paper, hoping that the reader will end up reading those thoughts and think those exact same things in the exact same way. And stream of consciousness just puts that up to that next level. The writing appears to kind of probe into the character's random thoughts and feelings without imposing a kind of outside order to it. And this shows the chaotic nature of the world which people were living in at the time, but it's also the ultimate freedom. This idea that it's up to the reader to piece everything together, not for the storyteller to just lead the reader by the nose. It's now up for the reader to take the different clues and put it all together and to really make their minds better for it. Many of these writers were what's called the lost generation. Often this title refers to the missing generation of European men who were killed or severely wounded in World War I. It's later taken by writers, and actually any person, who will abandon society's expectations. They'll reject the Victorian moral values. And we didn't talk about this much, but under Queen Victoria in England, there was a very sense of what was proper, what was right for people to do. And this included the ideas of what was the role of a man and what was the role of a woman, what was the role of a professional businessman as opposed to a working man. And these roles were very strictly held. And because Britain, if you remember, had the largest empire in the world at the time, they were forcing these kind of norms onto the rest of society. This lost generation is a direct rebellion of that. Its irritation was those morals had not stopped us from entering into a worldwide conflict where millions of people were lost. And if those morals, those beliefs that were supposed to lead us into a better place or a better society, or an even some level of heaven eventually, if those morals didn't do that and instead led us to warfare, then maybe it's better that human beings pursue pleasure and excitement rather than those kinds of stodgy old ways. Especially this idea that life was short. Many of the members of the lost generation were people who had seen the war and had seen its repercussions, and they did not want to be people who died without ever truly living. After the Great Depression, or during the Great Depression, this group is going to become even more disenchanted with the world. This fact that just due to a few people's lust for power and greed for money would make it so an entire world could suffer, where so many people would be homeless and jobless while there would still be a group of people partying off somewhere else, just made it so that they want to remove themselves even more from the world. And they would then, especially the writers of this group and artists, really wanted to show the world just how base, how mean, how harsh it really was, and that it was important that we take the moments, the time that we have to enjoy those special things which we truly care about. While the Lost Generation tried to show the world how much we should rebel against society, the one true image of this pure rebellion against society is definitely going to be the flapper. She, and this isn't just one woman, but the flapper becomes the symbol of the jazz age. This is a young woman who will bob her hair, and it's called bobbing because it's made short like a man's haircut. They would wear short, especially for their time, skirts. Oh my goodness, look how much leg that the ladies there are showing. They dated without the permission necessarily of their parents. They danced, they smoked, they drank, and they pursued sexual relationships with men outside of marriage. They wanted just to live life to the best that they can. The flapper style started almost immediately after World War I for a variety of reasons, and became very popular in America. But it really, while most women did not go to the extremes of the flappers as represented here, or even that I mentioned, this now showed that women had a place in the world besides just being housewives. Even those women who stayed in the traditional Victorian roles were finding that modern society was giving them completely new conveniences, and with those new conveniences like vacuums and washing machines and other sorts of things that saved them a lot of time and back-breaking labor, they now had time to pursue work, which could be paid or it could be charitable, and pleasure outside of the home. This is going to change the role of women in our society as well. As you can see from these presentations, there are many things which change in our society between World Wars I and World War II. These moments in time change us in the United States especially as defining what an individual truly is. But these aren't the only things that happened during this time. And while we're going to talk about the rise of dictatorships, especially in Italy and in Germany in this interwar period, it would definitely be worth your effort to spend some time researching this era and to see what else was going on, because these presentations have only scratched the surface.